All
All right,
right.
Court, go for it.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I see some familiar names. Fun seeing you guys call in from all over the US. And man, just really grateful to be here for the next hour or so. I know all of us here at Gold Medal Squared are. There's a lot going on right now in the world, so to get to connect to our community and to just geek out on volleyball a little bit feels refreshing for us, and hopefully productive and fun for you all as well. Again, my name is Courtney Thompson. I competed at the University of Washington. Woo woo, go Huskies! And then 10 years on the U.S. team, and was fortunate to play in 2 Olympics. Helped my team win a world championship. And you know I feel one of the things I feel most grateful for is all the amazing coaches that I got to play for. And I literally got to play for some of the best coaches in the world. And so I know that's like a tongue-in-cheek thing to say, but I legit got to do it and still get to be around these amazing minds, these amazing leaders. And I think I got to learn from some of the best setting coaches in the world. So I'm excited to, pass on anything I can to be a resource for you guys today. And I hope you guys are asking all the hard questions, like the real sticky points to training setters. And one thing that we get asked a lot, or we've noticed a lot at doing clinics, is people often hesitate or have an insecurity around coaching setting if they weren't setters themselves. And I've learned a lot about setting from coaches that maybe weren't setters themselves. And so I just think it's a false narrative, and I think it's really unproductive to get stuck on. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. If that's the case for you, I think we just got to get really good at coaching setting. And just like any other skill, there's some mechanical things that we can anchor to. We can help kids understand learning, movement patterns, create a really productive feedback loop for them and for us. And we can train really good setters, even if you weren't dishing the rock your whole life. So I'm excited to dive into that. And before we jump into your questions, which we will quickly, I just wanted to kind of reiterate a little bit of what was in that video, and also just kind of the lens that we want to coach setting from. And so we want our setters, just like any other skill in what we're teaching at Gold Medal Squared, to be simple over complex. And the name of the game for a setter is to be consistent. Consistent rhythm, consistent location. And the best way that we can do that is if our mechanics are really simple, so that they're repeatable and there's less room for error. And so we want our mechanics to be simple, and we just want to have this frame of mind that we're going to be good over time. And setters, if we've ever tried to set, the more perfect you try to be, the more like contracted your muscles get, the more weird your thoughts get, and we just tend to mess it up. We don't have to be perfect. We're always going to have a deviation of errors. We just want to be good over time and consistent. So mechanically, we want to enforce that. And also mentally, we want to make sure our feedback that we're giving to our setters is with those thoughts in mind. And our whole goal is to be the same when we're setting a quick hitter, the same when we're setting a go hitter, the same when we're setting an opposite, and that's where deception comes from. And when we study the best setters in the world, there tends to be 2 or 3 or 3 to 4 anchors of mechanics that are fairly consistent throughout. And so those are the ones that we want to teach. We want to get some really good fundamentals in place and then let the athlete go do their thing. But we're going to teach them these concepts to think about. We're going to teach them these movement patterns. And then at some point, I think the best setters I've been around find a way, in their own voice, in their own authentic way, to get players to play for them. And so there's some sort of, and again, this takes many shapes and forms and tone, but they're getting their hitters, they're getting their passers to fight for them. And I think they do that by setting the tone in hard work and how they're learning and how they're connecting with people, even when things are tough. So again, all of those questions around those concepts are welcome today. And with that, I think we already got some questions in the queue, Mike.
We're looking good. Lots of good questions here.
Dive in.
This is a good place to start here. Jason's wondering, when you have a new setter or a young setter, where do you start? What should your focus be? Should it be handwork, footwork? What would you tackle first?
Yeah, so man, I wish we had a net behind me right now. We kind of dive in, but on the online setting course, we go into great length, and you'll see videos on this. But for now, I think the first key that we want to talk about is ball shaped hands. And so, excuse me, if you watch again the best setters in the world, men and women, high level college athletes, international competitors, they just have this really simple ball shaped hands. So they don't look like this. They don't look, they're not in these weird positions. They're at some point they're running the ball and then they get here. And so we want to start with handwork. Once we've kind of dialed that in and gotten consistent, we want to get into our extension, and can I end with my palms to target? Can I end with big and open hands? Can I be aggressive with that finish? And we want our finish. Mike, tell me if this is too mechanical. We want our finish, though, to look the same when we're setting a go, as with the same intensity when we set a quick, same intensity as when we set a red. And so the force that we're giving the ball comes from our arms. But as far as our finish with our hands, again, that's why we start with that. It's got the most direct impact on where the ball's going. And so if I'm in a really compromised position, I want to take the ball in the same spot every time. But let's say I'm running and I take the ball here, but I overcompensate with this epic finish. We can put up a hittable ball. And so again, the first key is ball shaped hands. The second is extend palms to target. And when I go into gyms across the country, and I know I have literally 1 hour with this group of setters and may never work with them again, the biggest return on investment I get is dialing in this extension and this finish. And it's aggressive, it's simple, it's big and open. My palms are to target. So if nothing else, grab some videos on our website, on YouTube, of really great setters and just watch their finish. So I'm starting there. And then third, we want to go to footwork. We're adding a few more elements, so I want that right foot in forward, or right foot in front. And again, if you watch the top setters in the world, they have some sort of relationship with their right foot. So whether there's like a timing piece to it where all the power is coming from, the force they're putting on the floor, and then it coming back up. And if I'm tall, my shoulders are back and relaxed, and I've got these mechanics in place, then the force gets transferred and we're a little bit stronger. So whether your setter's like on the ground or jump setting or pivoting, all of those things come with our right foot in front and the relationship it has in timing. And so that's kind of the idea. I'm going to start with footwork third again, and then I'm going to introduce the pivot. And they're really closely linked. So I'm getting, if I'm going into footwork with a 10-year-old, let's say, we're starting with our right foot in front. And on day one, I'm likely saying right, left, right, we're off our right. And then here's a pivot move, because it's going to happen likely over half the time that they're going off of one leg and pivoting. So ball shaped hands, extend to target, right foot in front. Can I face the ball, angle the target, and introduce a pivot? That's kind of the order I'd go in.
Right on. Yeah. And you go into the gym, and so often you see when setters, especially, well, I'd say setters of all ages, you tend to see a lot of variability with their hands and with their arms. And these are all operating independently of one another. And this hand might go do this, and this hand might go do that. And one of the keys that we use with our national team is one unit. And Courtney and I are saying the same thing. Just using a different key maybe, but this all can happen as one piece. And that concept that Courtney's talking about really is easy for your athletes to wrap their heads around. And I think there's some subtleties between the men and the women at the highest level and how they set. But one thing that's consistent is they have their hands don't do all of this different stuff. They're just really simple and repeatable, and they're trying to operate as one piece here. And so you'll watch some setters on the men's side who there's just this little touch and their hands stay shaped before, during, and after the set. On the women's side, I think there's a little more of an extension, palms to target, like Courtney's talking about. But in both of those scenarios, those hands are operating as one piece. They're really consistent, and it's for sure a great place to start. All right, Court, let's
like that. Just
a reminder, if you guys could post your questions to the Q&A. Down at the bottom, there's a Q&A button. If you could post them there rather than in the chat, that'll allow others to kind of upvote your questions if they have the same questions, and we'll manage everything from there. Next question. it's an interesting question. What does your brain go through during
Oh,
plays in regards to, decision making? It happens so fast in set selection, in serve receive, and transition. Um, there's all this stuff going on. How do you process, or do you not? Are you just kind of going and doing your thing?
yeah. Wow, that's a great question. Guys, we're getting into this. I like it. I think there's a checklist for sure with that we want to teach our setters as far as decision making. So also get asked a lot, like, at what point am I introducing? Do we think about rotations and who I'm setting and percentages and sliding out percentages and then the block and then the blah blah blah. And it depends on your setter. I think for sure location and tempo are the most important thing. So for a long time, I'm just trying to get relatively consistent. And then the next thing I want to introduce is, all right, in each rotation, where's our strength? Where's our go-to hitter, our best in that rotation? And knowing that in each rotation, we want to have, what am I thinking of? A balanced distribution. There we go. Thanks. A balanced distribution with an emphasis, right? So there's got to be, like, if we have our best hitter on the outside and I'm just feeding her balls all day, everyone's going to know this. So even from a young age, just these concepts of like, okay, this is our best. I need to keep everyone involved, but I want to have an emphasis here. So that would probably be the next thing. And then from that, it's like, all right, where do our strengths match up with their weaknesses? That could be the next kind of step. And that's, maybe high school kids and, into college for sure. And then some of it's just like who's hot in the moment, so if it's 2020 and it's past there, we call that kind of the red zone. You want to have some sort of feel for the game, like, oh, it's getting tough, I'm going to set my go-to. And so during, I guess that's kind of a general overview. During the play, I often, when I'm siding out and I'm thinking college and on the USA team, this is kind of what I did. It's having knowing what our strengths are, where I kind of want to go, where I've been going in that rotation, maybe if there's a glaring weakness that I can expose on the other side. And in a perfect pass situation, what's kind of my game plan? What do I want to do? And maybe on a medium pass where I have an option to set two hitters, what's kind of the next best option? And I'm going to go from there. And here's the thing about every skill. There's a time when we want to be intellectual and we have to think about things and we want to be, focused on those things that help us most. And there's a time to compete and let go and kind of like trust your instinct. So for example, if you tell a young setter that she needs to set middle more, this has happened to me quite a bit, right? We're in a timeout. Hey, we got to get the quicks going. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go do it. Now we get back in the game and the pass is 15 feet off the net and she's setting your worst hitter. It's in the middle. Well, and she shanks it out of bounds and the coach says, well, not now. I mean, like on a perfect. So there's all these like little nuances with setting. And I think what I've been fortunate to learn from great coaches is that in practice, they're giving you reps at thinking through something and then going to apply it. And then how do we do? So if your feedback in practice is purely mechanical, and then we get in a game and your feedback is all about decision making, that's a skill that I think setters have to learn. Like, how do I take information and then go apply it in an appropriate way? And when we're teaching it, there's going to be all these gray areas that mess up, right? And of course, as coaches or as fans, we look at setters and you're like, no, don't set that. And then it works and you're like, yes, great set, great job. Keep that, So there's all these like little nuances. And I think it's important to make sure that our feedback in practice lines up with how we're giving feedback in a game so that, they can get good at that skill. And there was one other thought. I think when you're training decisions, it's important to, there's a time to just talk about outcomes, but there's a time to like, all right, tell me what you were thinking there, right? So if it doesn't work, or if our setter's like approaching it in a different way, to get curious, to try to meet them where they are, tell me what you were thinking here. And often it might, I've had a young setter be like, well, I hadn't set her for like 15 minutes and I think she's getting pissed. So I wanted to do that. Okay. It's not really what I was thinking, but I'm glad you shared, so there's all of this noise, especially for young setters that they can get stuck in. So ask questions, help them train their thoughts that get these decisions consistent over time. That was a long answer, but
Hey, Court, while we're talking about this, we
yeah.
should address the idea of looking at the block before you're setting. And I'm just curious if you've spent a whole lot of time doing that. What I've noticed is so many setters think this is important, and you watch them do it, and so often they make the wrong set, right? I'm
Yeah.
going to try to what I'm saying here, coaches, is here comes the ball into my hands, and I'm going to take a quick look at the block, and I'm going to get back to the ball, and I'm going to try to make a decision based on what I just saw the block doing. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen a middle blocker fronting the gap, a setter looking and seeing it and setting the gap. And so is this a skill we need to worry about? Is this a step that we need to worry about at all?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's a distraction. I think I got taught from Jim McLaughlin at UW is like you have a plan, you kind of know what the block's doing in general. And then after you set, you're going to take a look and you can see where they're fronting. If at your level, the block's moving in the beginning, or if there's a glaring weakness, and then you're going to know for the next time. But I think it's such a distraction, and you can make the right choice with poor tempo and poor location, and it will not matter. And I think the first order of operations is always location and tempo. And even if there's a solid block, it's hard to stop a really in rhythm hitter, And so it's less about, I guess all I want to say is I'm not looking at the block before. You're going to gather information after and go from there. And if in college in the US, we also have people that are watching from the bench that are helping your setter kind of see some trends and stuff like that. But my job is to pay attention to what hitters are doing well, the trends of the block, and then to keep a good tempo and location.
Yeah, right on.
And then I think I want to add one more thing to the question about mindset or training decisions. Is that we want, everything we do at Gold Medal Squared, we want it to be as game-like as possible. The best feeling you can have as an athlete is to walk out in a challenging environment where you're a little bit anxious, a little excited, but there's some nerves, and remind yourself like, oh, I've done this a million times. Like I just have to do what I do. And championships aren't won by doing anything special. They're won by people that can execute on the normal level in this environment. And so I say that because the best coaches I've played for have created these really challenging practices where we're competing when there's a lot on the line, when I'm forced to have to really struggle with decision making, and I'm going to mess up, and then I'm going to try something else, and I'm in the same mental, emotional, physical environment that I would be in a game. So if we can tap into that and find creative ways to challenge your setters, that way they're going to get in the game and be like, dude, I've done this. All right, let's just have some fun and let it rip.
Right on. Okay, there's a fair amount of interest in the ideas or the topic of rhythm and tempo. So we've had a few different questions. How do we train it? How do we keep our setters in rhythm? How do we work on timing? That type of thing.
Yeah, great question. I think one of the challenges to timing and rhythm is having a language around it that's consistent, because hitters maybe don't know what to ask for. Setter, we can say higher, and that actually means slower. We could say faster. Like, what does it all mean? So to get a really consistent language, and the way that we dictate tempo and timing is by the hitter's footwork as it relates to when the setter has the ball. And so again, you'll see this in the online videos. There's like a free 30-day trial if you haven't been in there, so we can check this out. But when the setter receives the ball, if the hitter's on their first step in a 4-step approach, that's like a hut tempo. That's about as slow as we want to go. That's an out of system set. If they're on their second step in a 4-step approach, when I have the ball, that's kind of like a go tempo. And what I also see with young setters is that when we say, hey, we're going to try to go fast, that they have this like really flat arc and it flies past the antenna. So if you saw that video before this session started, we talked a lot about having the ball drop inside. And so my hitter has options. And it's one of the most important things we can do as a setter is to give our hitter, let the hitters do the work. We want to make it as efficient for them to go do their thing. And we do that by keeping it inside and off. And so when I'm teaching a tempo, it's really about the arc of the set. It's where I take the ball and then the arc of the set. And so that's kind of the language that we want to have. I want to show them, if you got an iPhone, any kind of phone that we can take video and show them the arc when it's in rhythm, and make sure they have a really clear idea of what it looks like, you know. And then if we're increasing speed, Tom Tom Black was our coach on the USA team, and we started asking like, hey, is that fast enough? Is that fast enough? And he had this little saying. He's like, if you have to ask, it's not. Like, when it's fast enough, you know. And I think when you're in rhythm and the hitter's in rhythm, it's kind of this like, it's a beautiful feeling as a setter when all the stars align and you're like, okay, that's it. So when they get it right and their tempo's right, I am firing them up. I'm like, what did that feel like? What are you thinking about? What were you, what did your finish feel like? What did your feet like? All of these things. So they have to get really connected to what got them to that place. And yeah.
Yeah, I would say just going around the country over the last however many years and working with high school teams, one of the most common, I don't want to call it a mistake because we like speed, right? Speed is a good thing, but one of the most common things that I see are setters trying to go too fast when they're not maybe quite ready to go there. And so, you probably, most of us have heard the saying, don't do tactically what you can't do technically. And we need to just make sure that we don't fall in love with speed at the expense of effectiveness. And so, like Courtney said, letting your hitters do the work. And yes, we love speed, but at the end of the day, a hot hitter is a hot hitter, and they're gonna score a lot of points regardless of if that set's a little bit faster or a little bit slower. And so, effectiveness is what should be driving everything we do. You may have an athlete in your gym who is more effective with a higher set than with a faster set. We have athletes in our gym on the national team who really struggle with really, really fast sets because their windup is a little longer, a little slower. They're more physical. They need to be up high. And then we have athletes that need a fast set to survive. They need that to get out there to get some kills and to score. And so it is a little bit dependent upon the skill set of hitters, but don't force speed. It is great. We love it, but we don't need to force it, especially at the younger levels. And so we can create some really good timing with first step sets, second step sets, and start there and get really good at those two tempos. And then the other thing I would add is, so often our hitters are calling a set that is not appropriate to the situation at hand, right?
They're always wrong. Come on.
So, our hitters are always wrong. Yeah. But let's say there's a medium pass or a bad pass. It's out of system. The setter's on the 20-foot line and your outside hitter is calling for a shoot, right? Or a go. So coaches, really pay attention to the communication channel between hitters and setters. What are they calling? And then is it appropriate to the situation that's happening? But also pay attention to the communication that happens between the hitter and the setter, because we like to beat up our setters, but so often the hitter's not on their right step, right? And so a hitter will be on their first step, but they call to go, and then they're going to go give feedback to the setter as if the setter made the mistake. Well, it was actually the hitter wasn't on the right footwork. Now our feedback channels are all screwed up, right? And so we need to make sure that our athletes are on the correct step given the set they call, or else their feedback is not valid and we don't want it, right? And so we got to get those two things really aligned and really dialed in. So the setter's got to know what the set looks like, and we got to define the demands of those skills and those sets. But we also need to pay attention to the hitters and what they're calling given the situation and what steps they're on given the set they call, to ensure that the feedback loop and what we're talking about is accurate and we're actually making progress on the stuff that we're trying to improve. So there's that. Court, I've heard you talk about this one before. If your setters are not great communicators, but they have a solid skill level, I guess the question is, do we care? And if we do care, are there ways that we can make them more vocal? Do we just let them be who they are and go be a great setter?
Yeah, great question. First and foremost, I think it's about locating the ball well, and being consistent and all that. But at some point, all great setters, and I think the setter's influence matters more at the higher level you play. You can get a young kid that can just throw up a hittable ball, 12 and under. They're going to be pretty successful. But I think all these little questions that we're getting into matter more and more as we increase levels. So, if I'm coaching a team, I want my setter to be exactly who they are, and I want them to know their personality. I want them to be authentic, but I also am going to have a very high standard about how well connected they are to their teammates. Because as setters, everything runs through us. You're the quarterback of the team. You've got to communicate with the passers and the hitters. So I think, I absolutely think we can teach this. I think we can ask a lot of the questions to get to know the setter, and they don't have to be the loudest, but they do have to communicate well. And so there's a lot of ways to do that. And this really comes down to, like, what does it look like to be a great teammate, and what are the behaviors, the physical behaviors that it looks like to be a good teammate? Are we doing any of those, and asking my team that, laying it out, asking my setter that. What are the things that we can say? Can we say and do things to be a great teammate? What are we saying that helps our teammates rather than hurts them? And giving them language around, like we have coaches say, like, well, talk to your passers. Well, what am I supposed to say? Like, I don't know. As a kid, like, I didn't know what to say. It was like, let's go. Here we go. Come on. You're a cheerleader. And that's not super productive either. So giving them conversations to have, like, hey, I'm working for you. Keep me off here. Hey, tough server. Hey, keep me off the net. I'm going to work for you. And hitters, like, hey, I would empower my setters to say, tell your hitters what you're going to do for them, and then ask them to do something for you. So a middle hitter, I'm going to say, hey, I'm working to get you balls right now. Hey, make sure you stay off the net. I'll get you high. Make sure you stay off. I got you. Something like that. Or if my hitter's in transition, like, hey, you're working your ass off. Keep it up. I'm going to keep you inside. I'm going to get you some hittable balls here. Keep working. I see you working, And if we can give them some language, I think it's helpful, because I do think that's a skill that we can enhance, that we can train. I also think there's some people that it comes really naturally to, leadership, and we can have other people be great leaders on the team, but my setter needs to be able to communicate well.
Makes me think of Kawhi Leonard. So most of you have probably seen him play basketball. He was on the Toronto Raptors last year, and he's on the Clippers now. And I became a big fan of his last year watching the NBA Finals. I was actually going for Toronto because I just fell in love with how that guy played ball. And if you ever have a chance to watch him play in the playoffs, if we get back to the playoffs in the NBA, have your kids watch how he plays. He doesn't talk at all. He doesn't say a word. But how hard he works is inspiring. And so he'll go down and make a great defensive play or a great offensive play, and he literally turns around and runs fast down the court to the other end and D's up and just gets ready to go. And his intensity it's contagious. His focus is contagious. There's no smack talking. There's no showboating. There's no anything. It's just straight up hard work. Put your head down and grind. And I've got to think that behavior is contagious, and he's a leader in his own way. And here's a guy that doesn't say anything, and I was just fired up watching him, win an NBA championship by himself with the Toronto Raptors. And so, yeah, leadership can happen in multiple ways, and he is a great example of a quiet leader who just works his ass off and makes plays. So,
yeah, and we also got a question, kind of a follow-up. What percentage would you attribute to the best setters who are successful between two things, leadership and setting, skill and execution? And I'm not even I don't think I can give a number to that. I mean, it would just be purely made up, but I do think if you're playing at a high level, your setter has to locate the ball. But the best teams that I see winning really tough tournaments, there is a setter that people want to play for. And even if, they're authentic, they do it their own way, and there's a lot of ways to do it. But at some point, like Mike said, they work so hard for their team that in return, their team's going to show up, for them in the heat of the moment. And there's kind of that intangible side to it. So you learn that about people by putting them in the fire, and giving them opportunities to respond when things get tough. And then we're building our trust within ourselves to perform in that capacity. And we're also building trust in our teammates to do difficult things in difficult environments. And that's really what it comes down to.
That's great stuff. Let's see. What activities were really helpful for you as a setter in terms of consistency and placement? You know, I saw you and Tom over there working at it every day. So
Yeah,
the easy answer is reps, reps, and feedback. But what activities helped you?
Yeah, I think, you know, I mean, we call it setter tutoring, where we're getting like fairly isolated reps with just maybe a target, you know, someone catching or a hoop or something, excuse me, or maybe adding like one hitter. And it's a time where we're just talking about mechanics and we're just trying to get connected to a thought that is driving a behavior that I want so that I can go perform that in any environment, right? So I'm getting like, what thought is helping me get my ball shaped hands up early? Or what thought is helping me keep my right foot in front? So that okay, now I'm gonna stick with that and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna train this behavior. And if I've trained it enough there, when you get in an environment where there's a lot more variability, possible distractions, there's a lot more noise, then it's like, okay, no, this is like a habitual movement pattern now. And so honestly, I think it's just time and reps, which I know is like a club coach can be challenging. So then it's about making it really efficient. So being really clear on what am I trying to accomplish today? And the lesson I learned constantly while coaching anything is less is more. You know, like give an athlete one thing that you want them to get better at, and then make sure we have this really great feedback loop and an excitement around learning. You know, the best coaches I've played for make learning so fun, and it's so much the compass. And so when a kid, you know, you watch Tom coach his setters, and I do one little, like my hand stays a little bit more consistent. He's, you know, light me up. Like, that's what I'm talking about. What did that feel like? What were you thinking? That's your best rep yet. Let's do it again, you know? And so there's a good energy around making mistakes so we can learn and really being aggressive and going for it. So again, just making it as game-like as possible, I think helps us have more transfer. So in tutoring, if we can do it off of a platform, and I'm not just tossing a kid balls, it goes a long way. So I'm learning how to read a platform. I'm keeping my the tosses or the passes inconsistent, which is also in a game. It's always inconsistent. Yeah, so those types of things are really helpful.
Yeah, and like we discussed, I think it was yesterday, no, 2 days ago in block versus random. Sometimes as coaches, I fall into this trap. We forget to coach our setters once we go start getting competitive. So here we are in all this block, or it's blocked activity, setter tutoring type of stuff. We go play volleyball, and then I know my eyes gravitate to the block, and maybe I'm supposed to be, you know, coaching our setters. So remember to help your setters try to do some of the things that you're working on in tutoring once you go into competitive, and that'll help them transfer that stuff and put a focus on, like Court said, just pick one thing and see if we can transfer that into real life 6-on-6 volleyball in practice. All right. How about setters that tend to double, like, you know, the ball?
Yeah.
There's a couple questions about that. Do you have any ideas on how we can fix that?
Yeah, I said this earlier. So we want to get like ball shaped hands in place. But what honestly the biggest return on investment, again, especially with this, when we have like a discrepancy in our fall through, is that second key, extend palms to target. And I want, you know, our language might be a little different, but all of us, I think, want this to happen. And then I'm extending. I'm going to lower this a little lower than normal because my computer, big and open, and literally throwing my palms at the target. And if I can finish like this, right, often the ball will come out clean. And I want this to be really aggressive. So most kids that double finish like this, or they finish like this, or they do something like this, like really weird and inconsistent. And so I just simply like literally throw your palms at target. And when I'm setting overhead, I'm doing the same thing. When I'm setting middle, I'm doing the same thing. And if I can put their emphasis there, I swear kids like in like 10 minutes are like, oh my, like what happened? You know, and the coach is like, oh, we've been working on this forever. So really over exaggerate palms to target and show them video of good setters doing it. It can take 30 seconds to say, hey, this is what we're working towards. How sick is that? Like, how cool would that be? All right, we're close. We got to keep moving the needle. Let's go. And then have them do some reps. Maybe show them what they're doing. and then we show them the best setter. Okay, go do it again. So they have this visual of like, okay, that's how we're going to do it. And if we don't demo setting in the correct way, that's fine. Just find a few YouTube videos that can show that.
All right. For our college coaches that may be with us, you have an incoming freshman setter, and we're trying to integrate our teaching keys, making sure that setter understands the demands of the skill, while also integrating our offensive system based on the abilities of our players, right? And so college season, you only have 3 weeks to prepare. It's pretty fast. What would you prioritize, and how would you take a freshman setter through that 3-week process?
Well, good luck to you. Sending thoughts and prayers, because I remember what it was like to be a starting freshman setter. I don't know. I think it depends on the setter, the situation. There's a lot of nuances there, but for sure we got to go at the pace of the learner. So we want some mechanics in place. And there's got to be some sort of decision making. But I would do everything I could do to reduce the amount of noise for them and make it so clear. Hey, Lindsay, the best way that you can help your team is to invest in this skill today. And by the end of the month, this is where I want to go. But today, I want you to focus here, and the next day, and the next day, and just keep their attention on what's going to be most productive. So is your feedback in alignment with that? Do they know? When I ask a setter, I'll walk into any gym and say, what are you working on? And if they can't answer me really specifically, I think it's a miss. So we want to get really clear on how they can help the team most. And again, that's not really an answer. I will say, when I played at UW and the setter ahead of me left early, so we had no other option than for me to start. So lucky me. But I'm in there, and I remember the first year, like I rarely if ever, played defense in practice outside of the rally continuing. I never worked on my block the first year outside of like tutoring. And I say that because all of the reps we were getting were me setting. And I was on the offensive side all the time, because Jim, who was, one of the best coaches in the world, knew that the best way I could help the team win and have success was to set well. So we're just going to really invest in getting good at setting. And so I think that's where I'd start. Sorry for the vagueness.
Sometimes it's just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Reps, feedback, keep it simple. This next question is, I want to tackle it and see what you think, Court.
Yeah.
It's surrounding decision-making, and this coach is saying, hey, I've got some talented hitters that can score, but in some moments, the decision-making doesn't make sense. Why aren't we setting our best attacker in a certain moment? It's a transition opportunity. The score is tight. We're at the end of the set. We don't set and so this is pretty common, right? You're on the bench scratching your head, thinking, why the heck did we make that set, right? And like you said earlier, I've sat on the bench, why the heck did we make that set? And the hitter goes up and scores, right? And you're like, oh yeah. But I think there's a couple of things, and Court can confirm this because she's a setter, but confidence, what the sets that you're confident in probably drives some decision making, right? Like in certain scenarios where, hey, I feel really confident making this set, and that could override a hot hitter who may be in a position where I'm not as confident setting. So there's that. The other thing is, mechanically, do we get in the habit of certain scenarios? Maybe when I have to move backwards, I just feel like my mechanics take over and they do the same, they make this set, And so maybe again, it goes back to confidence. In certain scenarios, certain mechanical situations, I feel more confident as a setter making this set versus maybe setting the right hitter in that situation.
Yeah, 1000% ditto to that, Mike. And I think I don't know, if I'm coaching and my setter's doing that, I really hope that I'm coming from like, okay, I need to understand what they're thinking. And if the setter's really going to be open and honest about like you said, like, I feel weird setting overhead today. So I know that's my best hitter, but it's game point and I set a hut. Okay, cool. And if it really is a decision thing, then maybe I'm not coaching it well enough as a coach. So for me, that would look like if my setter in the heat of the moment, under pressure, is making decisions that are less than ideal and I think she can make or he can make better ones, then I'm going to create more environments in practice that put them under pressure. And I'm going to watch the video and say, just talk to me about what you were thinking. And we're in this together. And the best coaches I've had, they can be upset, they can disagree, but they never felt like you made the wrong one. Why did you do that? I trained you better. They would come from this place of like, all right, let's figure this out. We're getting stuck here a lot in row one. Like, tell me, and if you can get your setter to start talking to you about where she's uncomfortable, you are winning as a coach. Because now we're going to accelerate learning. But if she's trying to protect and there's been times in my career where I didn't want to tell my coaches what was uncomfortable because I felt weak, because I didn't want them to bench me, because whatever. And it always stunted my growth. And so maybe as a coach, that's a question you're asking every day. Where do you feel great? What are the areas that you feel uncomfortable you want to get better at? And just make it the norm, And then and to come from a place of, hey, we're in this together. What are you thinking? Let's work on this. Can we create more opportunities in practice to respond to this sort of thing?
Yeah, I just love the idea of just identifying the issue. Grass is green, the sky is blue.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's tackle this together.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be ego or emotion. Let's just go to work.
Yes.
That's what we're doing. We can make it just kind of, it is what it is. All right, let's see. What types of communication did you make sure you displayed during a match to make sure your team was all on the same page?
Man, I've royally messed it up a lot. I think what I tried to do was, each hitter's different, each passer's different in some way, like stay connected to each player on the court as a setter, whether it's just eye contact and a high five or, with Feluca, we usually talk shit and that becomes like funny and it like helps us. With Jordan, it's a little bit more technical, like for examples of players on the national team. With Nick, we also had like a funny banter that was kind of intense at times. So it's different. I think you just got to be intentional about staying connected. And for me, I'm really intense. I'm really vocal. I also try to use humor. So that was me at my best. And knowing that, like, okay, am I really acting in alignment with that all the time? Alicia Glass and Carly are very different than me. So for them, when they're at their best, it looks different, it sounds different, it feels different, and it's all good. We need both. So I think maybe just asking your setter, like, in the moments that the team's playing the best, like what does that look like for us as a team, and what are you doing to help add to that? And let's contrast it by a time when it feels just wonky and weird and uncomfortable, whatever. What does that look like? Probably lack of eye contact, no one's talking, like blah blah blah. And just get them to notice the difference. And then, okay, what can you control about this? What are the behaviors that you can control about this? And if we don't want to talk about this like nonstop, but I think there's a time and a place for it.
What's your thoughts on jump setting?
Oh, yeah.
And when should we introduce that with our kids? Like, where is that on the priority list?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's also a nuanced answer because I just think it depends on how good your setter is and how physical she is. I think at a higher level, it helps consistency and it helps tempo. It puts a little bit more pressure because of timing on the block. So I don't know any high level setters that don't jump set at some point. That being said, whenever you introduce it to your setter, she's probably going to get worse location wise before she gets better. So maybe in slices in practice, like, hey, for the first 20 minutes, we're just going to commit to this. It's going to get weird. It's going to be ugly. We're going to do it. And then the next, 2 weeks later, we're going to, all right, 30 minutes, we're going to do this. And then 40 minutes, we're going to do this. And at some point, I don't know, it depends on, the league and what you're actually wanting for these athletes, where that is. But I think to not fully dive in, to just like train it, like any other skill, one slice at a time. So we're building our capacity to be comfortable kind of doing that and giving them space to mess it up, because that's how we learn.
Yep. All right. We got a footwork question from Danny, and it's related to moving backwards or kind of into area 1 or 2 on the court, and what's the appropriate way to manage that. And first of all, those are hard plays, and we know that hitting efficiency decreases when our setters have to move back. Mm-hmm. So it's something we need to get good at, something we need to have a lot of reps practicing. Danny, I would say that if your setter has to move kind of directly back along the net, anywhere kind of in front of the 3-meter line, that left, right, left pattern that you mentioned in your question is appropriate. And it's just a little bit easier. And so in that scenario, I would recommend left, right, left. However, if the pass gets pushed kind of back towards area 1 and your setter needs to get on the move and go run somewhere, that's probably better suited for a right, left, right pivot move and pivoting off of the right foot. And so I think up near the net in front of the 3-meter line, moving backwards, left, right, left. If I'm on the run, probably I'm going right, left, right. Courtney, anything to add there?
No, I think you nailed it.
Okay. Those are hard plays. We gotta work on that in tutoring. All right, let's see here. Courtney, you talked about taking the ball in the same place every time. Where is that place?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to tell here on the screen, but like when I'm teaching ball-shaped hands, like I pretend like there's a window in front of us, and I want my hands to start here, shaped early, and then I want it to go straight up the window. So I don't know, 45-degree-ish in front of my forehead is usually where I'm going to take it. Certainly above my head. I want to be behind the ball. I want my right foot in front, and so there's kind of that relationship, and I want to take it there every time. So again, this is why if my hands are here early, then I dictate where I take the ball. If I wait and then just go where the pass is late, then I'm changing, so then I become inconsistent with where I take it. My sets become more inconsistent. So I want these up early so that I know where to get my feet in order to take the ball in that same spot over and over and over, which is again why we want as many live reps as possible for setters.
All right, this next one's a good question. I'm glad you're answering it because I don't know how to answer it. When you have a hitter that's in a slump, maybe it's your top hitter, and all setters are going to go through this. All hitters are going to go through this. We're all going to have slumps, right? Where we're not playing as well as we'd like to. How do you manage that as a setter? What's your mindset and kind of way to approach that?
Yeah, I hope everything I do as a setter feels like it's expansive for the hitter. So like if you think of someone yelling at you, like, don't hit it out again, whatever, you have this like constricting feeling, right? And we do it to ourselves too. So if you double a ball and your first thought is like, oh shit, I hope they don't dig it high. There's like a constricting thought, And so I want my thoughts, we first coach ourselves to be like, all right, stay aggressive. You got the next one, stay aggressive. And so it's the same for other people. So with hitters, I think you got to build a confidence in them. So something along the lines of, dude, stay with it. We're going to figure this out. So my language is a lot of we, and I got you. I'm working for you. Keep swinging. We're in this together. We're going to figure it out. Like those types of things, and knowing like it's all part of the game. So for your hitters and setters and coaches and like everything, if it were easy, it wouldn't be very fun. Like, so I always ask my teams, I'm like, guys, if you could play fourth graders the whole year, would you? And they're going to laugh and they'll say, well, no, why not? Because it'd be boring. Exactly. So that being said, challenge and pressure and stress may not be going anywhere. As coaches too, the reason we love coaching is because there's this unknown and there's this risk, and there's slumps. And there's all these things that we know are inevitable, yet sometimes act surprised when we're in it. So for me, what I aspire to do is like, okay, what is my relationship with challenge and stress? And can I help my athletes understand this is all part of becoming great? Every great athlete, every hitter before you has been through a slump. So it's how you engage with this process that's going to make the difference. And we can tank and we can feel sorry and we can get negative, and that maybe that's going to help you learn. But ideally, what sets great players apart is how they respond when these things happen. And you can even say, like, in a game where you played your best, in a game where you were awful, did you make mistakes in both? Yes. Did you hit the ball out in both? Yes. Okay, what was the difference in, how you responded? And it's always very clear. They're either excited about fixing it or just going to the next one because it's like they let it go, or they're ruminating, they're getting pissed or getting frustrated. And so just helping them be aware of these thoughts that they have, and that their response is always within their control. Anyway, I could go on that one, but I want to infuse my hitters with confidence at all times.
The second part of that question is as it relates to, okay, you've got a slumping hitter. How do you handle that? But you may also have a hot hitter, and how much can you set that hot hitter? And I think back to world champs in Italy a couple of years back, and it was the best stretch of volleyball I think our guys have ever played. We were so good it's a long tournament for 3 weeks. And then we ran into a Poland team in the semis, and their opposite got hot. And every time in transition, an opportunity to score a real point, they were going to set this guy. And our block knew it. We talked about it in timeouts. It didn't matter. We couldn't stop him. And so when a hitter gets hot and your opponents know it and there's nothing they can do about it, I would say save those opportunities for those big moments. Transition, you can set them as much as you want to set them. They set this guy, I don't know how many sets in that match. It was a 5-game match, but over and over and over again, and he crushed us. And so there's an element of deception that just goes away entirely when a hitter gets hot, and it can't be 100% of the time. But Court, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I agree. I'm just thinking how fun it is as a setter and a coach when you have that athlete that's like lighting it up, like, well, this is easy. Yeah. All right. And then you go away from it and you get blocked, like, well, all right, yeah, we just gotta, hey, broke, don't fix it, And I don't know. I think I agree with what you said, absolutely.
Okay. When picking your setters for a team in a tryout situation, what are you looking for?
I'm looking for 5'7" and under. No,
can't block.
Yeah, exactly. Can't jump, can't block, average quickness. No. It goes back to like, if you look at the stats, and again, this is on our platform and our course, it's really clear to see the ways setters most influence the team having success. And it's very clear that the best way they can help their team is to locate to the pins on a perfect pass, locate to the pins on a not so perfect pass, set the quick hitter on a perfect pass, set the quick hitter on a not so perfect pass, and then serving, defending, and blocking in that order. So I'm picking my setters based on that, and it's real tempting to pick the like 6'7" lefty who's like has okay hands or whatever, but she can tip or hit. And certainly if, I don't know, at some point maybe that outweighs depending on your age. But the better we get, the more we rely on a setter being able to run the offense. So for me, I'm dictating it on who can put up the most hittable balls in the most situations. And then I'm going to train them up in everything else. Oh, I can't. All right. Oh, there you
go. Your favorite question here, Court. How do you deal with a hitter that has a bad attitude?
Oh, man. I don't know. I've never had one. So next question. Man, I don't know. This is like teaching human nature, because we so often get distracted by other people's opinions or other people's reactions when ultimately that's out of our control. So when going into teaching a setter this, there is only so many things you can do to help that hitter. And then can I get them to understand all of those things, and let's put energy into those, and then let's let the rest go. And ultimately what I've learned about pouty hitters or hitters that roll their eyes, like it's more about them than it is us, for sure. And if you have to make a big deal about it being a bad set or like in the net or whatever, that's just a lack of confidence. So in a nice way, I might talk to my whole team about that, and choosing how to respond. If a hitter ultimately is really pouty, I'm going to try to understand them at some point, depending on our level of investment here. Get to know them, what drives them, what motivates them, find some way to connect with them that we can share. But yeah, I don't know. You're not going to be best friends with everyone. At some point, you can't control it. You just got to do your best and try to let the rest go. Easier said than done, and then if they're acting a fool for too long, I don't care how good they are. Get out of here. And that's a culture question that you want to answer as a team and what you're all about. But at some point, I think it does a disservice to the kid to let that kind of behavior run over time. So those are some hard coaching decisions, but the best coaches that I've played for had a very clear level of tolerance. And if you didn't meet it, you don't play. And this is where we're going. This is what we're all about. So get on board.
All right. How about set plays and serve receive? And how do you, are you calling those? Are you communicating that with the hitters? And then what happens in transition in terms of
Yeah,
set plays?
I think here I remember in club we had like 7 plays that were set, so I would just call the number, and then everyone it was like football. I think it made it worse. So essentially, I think as pins we have an optimal speed that we want to go on an in-system pass, and we have an out-of-system speed. For my quick hitters, there's probably 4 sets. Maybe at a younger level, there's 2, and I just want to get really good at those. And so before if I'm in serve receive, I'm making eye contact with each hitter and kind of, hey, I'll keep in rhythm here. So for the pins, it's always kind of the same. For my middle, I'm calling it. And then what I started doing later was I would say, hey, Faluka, in transition, let's try to expose this gap. In trans, let's try to run a slide. In trans, if we can, let's do this. And then, but it's ultimately up to them to call it. But I want to be on the same page of at least how I'm thinking. And maybe at younger level, that's too much info. But yeah.
Okay. I'm multitasking here.
Hmm.
Are there 3 elite setters that you would recommend a young athlete go and watch as a model?
Yeah, I can send you all my tapes. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Besides from, yeah.
Oh, you know what, Mike? You might have a better answer now. I think mine might be slightly outdated. There's a YouTube compilation of the best setters in the world. If you literally just type in best setters in the world, it's like 6.5 minutes long, and it's the background music is some weird Sarah McLachlan song, like a puppy commercial. But anyway, it's a compilation of it's men only, but it's these high level male setters, like, and it shows like real time, and then it slows it down, and it's such a cool video of seeing their mechanics and how different they are, but all like the keys are all the same. And I used to watch that every day before practice. And so there's so many good setters now. I think our setters in the U.S. would be great ones to watch.
Sure.
I'm not giving any names. Sorry, Mike, if you want to.
How about we try to round up some videos and we'll email them to you guys?
Yeah, let's do that. I like that idea.
All right. How about video? As an athlete, what were your video sessions like? What was the interaction with coaches like? What was really valuable for you in terms of video sessions?
Yeah, I think to accelerate learning. And again, we geek out on this at Gold Medal Squared, and we talk about it a lot in the course. But when you're learning something, you want to have a really clear visual of what it looks like and what you're aspiring to. And also, I think it helps tap into like what's possible for a kid. So when you're looking at an incredible setter, and I'm just like, doubling every ball, it's like, hey, this is what we want it to look like. Let's start here. This is what I want you to focus on today. So there's kind of I think before practice, it can take 30 seconds to show a clip of that. I think that's important. And then for me, I said this earlier, but if you can get your setters, this comes from personal experience of not doing it well. But I remember a very specific transition in college where I felt protective and like I couldn't say where I was uncomfortable, or I would like go into video and just have this pit in my stomach, like, oh God, we're going to watch all my bad sets. This is the worst, And then once we had this like breakthrough with Jim, and I was like, oh, we're on the same team here. And he's trying to help me get better. And so if I could just be open to like, this is what I was feeling, this is what I was thinking, this felt good, this didn't. And we have like a little bit of space between the sets and like an emotion behind it, then it's just fun. So fun, I just spit all over my computer. But, so what it looked like was watching, usually by rotation with the coach, like what we went through, or just mechanics. So in the beginning, it was simply mechanics. If you have a data volley and you're able to like break up by set, so every time I set a go, this is what it looks like. And let's talk about tempo. Let's talk about mechanics. Again, back to that one thing. I think Tom Black was exceptional at this, but when we were watching video, he would ask, hey, what were you working on in practice? And I'd tell him, and all of our feedback was around that one thing. Because it's easy to start seeing like all the things that are going wrong, and to help your setters, we want to help help them stay really focused on this one thing. Yeah,
Okay.
that was a lot, but
There's a question about set location. I'm trying to pull up the PowerPoint so we can show it here,
okay.
but while you're answering this next one, I'll look for that. In terms of styles, like with the touch on the ball, hand positioning, and the touch on the ball, do you think there's one way to do that, or do you think everyone has their own unique touch? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like a basketball shot that you see kind of like a general consistency over the best shooters, like in the NBA, but there's always these like little quirks. And I think, again, I'm going to circle back to these 4 keys because it's what we see consistently among men and women that are really great setters. They're simple, their hands are up early, they extend in a very simple way, and they're pivoting, they're facing the ball, they're redirecting towards the target. And so those are consistent. And I think as a young setter, like I remember when first learning a lot of these keys in our team, when our team was shifting into a gold medal squared type of training and playing, competing, it felt really mechanical. And we felt like, oh, I have to be like this, So at some point, the system helps the athlete. And then once there's this level of comfort, then the athlete makes the system better. And we understand, and then there's this fluidity around it. And I think that's all part of the learning process. Like if we try anything, if we all pick up a guitar or whatever today, it's going to be very mechanical. And then the more we train, then it becomes this like really like nuanced thing where we kind of add our own flavor. So yeah, I think there's room for that for sure.
Okay. So one of the questions is in relation to how far off the net do we want to set the ball? And so I think our targets are so critically important, right?
Yeah.
What is our setting target? Why? And I'll just throw out a few numbers here and then I'll let you take over. We know that a perfect set, let's call it a 300 efficiency, inside an inside set. So let's call a perfect set 3 feet inside and 3 feet off, just for now. An inside set, let's call that 5 feet inside. The hitting efficiency doesn't drop very much. So in other words, we don't lose a whole lot of efficiency if we miss inside. When we set off more than 5 feet, this is how the data was gathered. The sets off more than 5 feet, the hitting efficiency looks about the same as it does when we miss inside. So when we miss inside, when we miss off, we're not getting crushed. It does decline, but it's not a crusher. When we go tight, in terms of the data that Joe gives us, a perfect set is a 330 or a 33% efficiency. When we go tight, we drop negative immediately. And when we set wide, we drop significantly, almost to negative. And so maybe I'm just answering this question entirely, I don't know, but Court, how important is it to establish these targets early, and so your kids understand the demands of the skill? Because these are big differences, and you're talking 2 or 3 feet.
Yeah, it is the most important thing you can teach a setter, and we train mechanics in order to make that happen. But I remember the first time I watched the University of Washington play, I was in high school, maybe a little bit overconfident. And I told Jim, I was like, how come your setter can't push it out to the pin? And he started laughing at me. He's like, no, that's where we're aiming. And I was like, huh, all of my coaches have said, like, push it out. And those numbers Joe showed us before the World Championships in 2014 that we won. He showed our setting group these numbers, and he was like, you guys could literally miss 5 to 8 feet inside and off, and your hitters will still hit over 200. And if you set tight, it goes to 0. And if it's wide, it's -10, or I might have flipped those, but it's like, it was so drastic that it shifted a lot for me. I was like, dang, I don't have to be perfect. We just got to put up these hittable balls. And it's more so at a younger level as well. So I'm usually 3 feet in, 3 feet off is a nice place to aim. For younger kids, make it 4, make it 5 and go from there.
It's this, like Courtney said, establishing targets in your gym will give you the biggest bang for your buck above anything else. So establishing passing targets, establishing digging targets, and establishing setting targets. If you had a week's worth of practice and you had a big tournament to go play in, you're gonna get better hammering home those three things than anything else in terms of system of play. And so, Dave, you jumping in here?
Oh yeah, we got a graphic coming for you guys. And while we're waiting.
Yeah, sorry, I'm pulling up a graphic that is showing exactly what you're talking about here. Give me just a second.
Oh, sweet. While we're waiting, we're I mean, we're all in this together, you know, and we're fortunate to have this gold medal squared community, but we wanted to find ways to stay connected with you guys. So we're trying to do more of these since we can't get together. And on Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time and on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time, I'm going to be doing an hour-long webinar each with athletes only, or with athletes. I think coaches can be in there too. But if you want to pass on, we'll put the info in the link, and it'll be on our website. But if you want to sign up for that, Monday at 9 and Tuesday at 2, I'm going to be talking about mindset and kind of off the court things with athletes. If you want to pass that along.
Awesome. Okay, so Dave, thanks for throwing this up.
Awesome.
Where to go? You want to explain this, Dave?
Oh yeah, I'll pull it back up. I took it off momentarily. So this is what Mike was talking about, where the data shows, depending on where the set goes, what hitters' hitting percentages are. So yeah, Courtney or Mike, talk about that for a second.
Okay. You see here, sets that go wide. Here we are about 100.
Negative 100.
Sorry,
I think
negative
100, right?
Yeah.
Sets that go tight, we're right around a 0. And then you can see the green and the yellow were staying fairly consistent. And so it just doesn't hurt us that much. And with our men's team, we're actually setting the ball out of system up to 6, 7, even 8 feet inside, because it's so easy for those athletes to continue on that angle of approach and make that adjustment. And so again, establishing your targets is so critical. When we go in and we work with young setters or high school teams, whatever, this is the number one issue with setting that we have to tackle and that we see more than anything else is setters that have been trained to set tight and that set to the pin, and it's a crusher. And so I know it's unpopular with some people and some coaches, but we're trying to follow the data here, and the data is indicating that there's a massive difference in these sets, and it's a critical component to increasing the effectiveness of your offense. And so let's see here. Let's do one more question, Court, and then we'll wrap this up.
And then real quick, Mike, if anyone wants to see this video, it's on today's tab of the virtual clinic. So just scroll down through the setting course and you'll find one that's about data and stats. And all this is explained in that video.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Court, real quick, let's talk about 5'1" versus 6'2". There's a couple questions about that. So you got a very athletic setter, high volleyball IQ, goes for everything, but she's short. Sounds familiar.
Hey.
Hey, yo. And then, so let's just tackle that. And I think I think we've hammered it home. We've talked about it, effectiveness, but speak to that a little bit. And then we can talk about maybe a situation where you would want to run a 6'2". What would those two setters look like?
Yeah, I think it depends on, to me, that's just all personnel. You know, like, do you have two opposites that are effective hitting? Do you have two setters that can locate, at this similar level of efficiency? And then, if that's the case, then great. A 6'2" can be an awesome option. There's obviously, if your setters are like really different in style, that could be a concern. But again, if they're locating and the numbers are higher with both of them running the show and they're able to hit, then great. That's my perspective. I don't know that I have much more to say on that, Mike.
Yeah, so often coaches will want to run a 6'2" because they get more athletes on the court, and that's a viable reason. In our world of club, getting more kids on the court and playing is a good thing. One of the things that gets missed sometimes is if we truly want to look at effectiveness and we're worried about with winning, more so than we are with just getting all of our kids on the court, Sometimes one setter will be drastically less effective than one of the other setters, and we don't know that. And so we'll go through 3 rotations with a setter that's drastically less effective, and then we'll have our other setter come in, and she's going to be more effective. And we don't know, right? So we got to know setter by hitter stuff if we can, or at least side out efficiencies when each setter is on the court. But to answer the original question, if you have a short setter who's high volleyball IQ, who's a baller, who can locate the ball, that's a no-brainer. And I can tell you that France, Brazil at times, Iran, they all have small setters, and they all have won big tournaments, and they're phenomenal volleyball teams. And so let's not get too caught up with the size of your setter. Let's really pay attention to the effectiveness of the offense that they run. And I know Court will agree with that.
Just slow clapping over here. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, Dave, can you confirm the times for the athlete call, please? If possible, or Mike?
Yep. 10 a.m. on Tuesday, Pacific time, but that one's full. And so we just added another one a couple hours ago for 2 p.m. Pacific that same afternoon.
Okay, both on Tuesday. I got Monday. I said that earlier, so forgive me. I was wrong.
Yeah, both on Tuesday. And so if any of you
open.
coaches out there want your players in that session, you can send them the virtual clinic link and they can sign up there for that 2 p.m. Pacific time.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks again, you guys, for being in this with us today. Great to be connected with you, especially in these times. Hope you're, from all of us at Gold Medal Squared, hope your families are staying safe and you're doing well. And Mike, Dave, thanks for putting this on.
Thanks to all. We will follow up with everyone via email with some information. I know we want to see some set videos. I'll send out this chart regarding passing setting targets. It's so important. We all need to be in the loop on that one. And hopefully that'll help you guys get a little bit better once we get back to practice. So anyhow, thanks a lot, and we'll see you soon.